Live.
We're live? Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, we'll start now. My apologies to everyone who's had to watch this gray-haired guy try and figure out technology, but I do promise you that we worked it out earlier this week and it worked. It worked perfectly, but something changed as settings do, and here we are. But maybe that's what it's been like for your life lately, where you sort of had the normal way that things operated and you were comfortable with it, and then all of a sudden they don't work anymore. Maybe that's sort of been everyone's experience, but if you're a first responder, you have probably an intensified kind of experience because you're the ones who are out there sort of regulating the rest of the world as we're trying to panic our way through this, this pandemic. So we are here to just talk to you all because first of all, let's just say we love you and you've got your biggest fan club here. I'm going to just introduce everyone who's participating in the wellness webinar and say a few words, and then we're just going to pour out whatever little droplets of wisdom we have for you. So thank you all to our first responders who tune in, or really anybody. But our first responders have a very unique calling and experience out there in the field. So today's wellness webinar is joining us is Gerald Mishue with the Lowcountry Firefighter Support Team. Oh, sorry, he's waving. And then we have Guy Van Horn, who's our peer support coordinator for the Charleston County Sheriff's Office.
Good morning.
And then we have Laura Tate, who's with the First Responders Support Team through the Department of Mental Health. So we have a team of clinicians who do nothing but work with first responders. So they understand what you do, they understand your routines, your hypervigilance, all the kinds of things with critical incidents. So, but most importantly, and I'm Chaplain Rich with the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy, but most importantly, I always think of like, you know, when I was a kid, I was never good at sports, but I remember playing Little League and my parents came to one game. It was the one game I didn't sit on the bench, and I went to catch the ball in the outfield and it was perfect. And I caught it with my nose instead of my glove, but that was the last time I played. But just seeing my parents there looking from the stands and encouraging me, even if they didn't say anything, it just meant the world to me. And if there's one thing we want you to come away from this webinar, it's just knowing that you are loved and appreciated. And certainly the four of us are here today because we're those folks in the stands who are cheering you on and really appreciate what you're doing. And we've either been through it or we've helped people through it, but all of us understand the situations that you find yourselves in life. And we just want you to know you're not alone, you're loved and you're appreciated. Many of you are out there in the field and you're working, you're responding. You're sort of forced to be around people and respond to calls where you don't really know what the risk is. And you probably have fear of this virus and contracting it and possibly bringing it home. There's a lot of anxieties. And we're sort of all day long seeing folks responding to these risks, but then they're isolated at home, maybe. Some folks have sort of self-quarantined away from their families a little bit in a room just to try and limit contact. Some folks live alone and now they can't visit their families or friends. So on one hand, you're out in the community connecting with all these people that you might not be wanting to connect with at the moment, but the people you really need to connect with, you're isolated from. And we're all sort of dealing with this and this growing anxiety. And the reality is that this is the first time for all of us. So we're trying to figure it out. You know, many of us, we were joking earlier that some of us may be wearing our pajamas right now with our uniform shirts, right? We don't really know how to navigate this. We're not really sure how to deal with it. And what do you do? And what do you do when you have all these new family issues that you didn't anticipate, like school and things like that? Or what do you do if you live alone and there are no more distractions? There's nothing left to watch on Netflix. YouTube's feed is just boring you out of your mind. And now you're starting to face personal issues or personal thoughts and having to really self-examine in a way that you could always distract yourself from before, and you're challenged. So, you know, what I've always had it said to me, when you have a planter filled with mud and dirt and manure and all that kind of thing, you have a choice, and the choice is to grow something in there rather than stare at the mud. So today we know what the mud is, but we want to talk about it a little bit. And then we also want to talk about what can we plant in there? What can we do to make something positive grow out of this experience that we're all going through? So what I'd like to do is just get some input from all of our team and sort of get a sense of what's the temperature like out there. What are we hearing? What are folks struggling with, and how might we help? So let's start with Gerald. Gerald, tell us a little bit about what you're sensing and hearing out there from peers and from our firefighters, EMS, dispatch, and other folks out there in the field.
Well, there's been a lot of different changes, and let me say that we understand the situation with a lot of folks who are out there doing their jobs and not having any contact with anyone other than the people they were responding to. And it's difficult for us too, because we are pretty social by nature, and all of us on this sitting there are accustomed to being out to see people and to shake hands and to talk to people and to that sort of thing. And we, for the necessity of doing the right thing and for also setting a good example, we are not able to visit fire stations, EMS stations, and that sort of thing right now. But we want you to know that we are here, and we do care about you, and we do have a system in place to provide services to you if you need those services. So we're your biggest cheerleaders, I suppose, and it's frustrating, and we are feeling that frustration with you. A lot of firefighters in particular are not responding to as many calls now. That the EMS calls have been limited, and that's been a change for them. They are worried. I guess one of the most important things we hear, they're worried about exposing themselves to something on duty and then taking it home to their families. And that is a real situation. We know that is, we know that people have been exposed and have actually been tested positive for the virus because of that exposure as a first responder. So a lot of people are feeling frustrations, whether it's on a medic unit, whether it's in the 911 center, or whether it's in a police cruiser or a fire truck. A lot of people are being frustrated by the fact that they want to help and they are not necessarily able to. So I would just suggest to continue to do what you're doing. We will get to the other side of this. I believe personally that we're going to be stronger for it. I believe we're going to appreciate the smaller things in life that maybe we didn't before when we were in such a big rush all the time. So just know that we're here. Know that all the people represented here in this webinar are here for you, and all of the people that work with them are here for you. So
it's awesome.
We're also mindful of our 911 folks. Our 911 folks have had a different situation now. They're getting a lot of calls for people who are reporting social gatherings and wanting somebody to come out and do something about social gatherings. So that it's a lot of unreasonable people that don't understand why that can't necessarily happen. Plus, most of our 911 centers are confined places where we have sometimes a fairly large group of people in one confined space, and they, like firefighters and police officers and paramedics, they're also concerned about what somebody might bring in and what they might take home to their family. So it's a very trying situation right now, but I think people are bearing up pretty good, and I just want to be sure everybody knows we're here.
Awesome. Thank you, Gerald. Guy, what's it look like from your vantage point?
Thank you, Rich. Good morning, everybody. One of the things that comes to mind is the typically normal operations before the virus. Everyone kind of stays in their same lane, but an emergency like this, it really reminds us how interdependent law enforcement, detention, EMS, dispatch, fire, all those things are how we're dependent on one another, and that you men and women are out there on the front lines, and we applaud you for that. And our hearts also go out to your families, those folks that are at home, worried about you at home, taking care of kids and those kind of issues. So we're also lift up those families that are every bit the hero that their first responders are. The one thing that really impresses me about COVID-19 and the family of first responders is we're just used to dealing with critical incidents that are typically short in duration. A car crash, a fire, an EMS run, officer involved shooting, those kind of things. They're very intense, but they're usually short in duration. And here we've got the COVID-19, and it is a critical incident, but it's being so long that we're in the midst of it. And that's one of my worries, is that the pressure's mounting. Old story I was told as a boy, the one about putting the frog in a pot of water on the stove and then turning the water on slowly and turning it up and turning it up. The frog doesn't realize that the frog's being cooked and under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress until it's too late. And that's almost kind of the situation we're in. Another aspect of it is the fact that it's compounding because it's still going on. When it hit and started affecting us all with quarantine and those kind of things, we were dealing with those situations. And if you stop and think about it, we lost our normal. And it's hard to put words into it, but when you lose your normal, you almost grieve what you lost. But we don't have time to grieve what we lost because each day things change. So we're reacting to daily stresses. So that's piled on top, and then you have anxiety. And anxiety is dealing about the future. We're worried about where we're going to get that toilet paper. We're worried about the kids' education. We're worried about going to work and maybe getting sick. So it's just a combination of all those things. So we really need to be focused on taking care of ourselves. And I think in identifying that this is an abnormal situation, but the things that we're feeling and going through, they're normal things. And we're probably all going through them. And we hope that people have, you feel better to know that your neighbors are experiencing the same things that you're going through. Laura, can you help us identify some of those things and maybe some tips on how we can move through that?
Yeah, sure. I think you said it really well. Whether we know to identify it this way or not, we're all grieving. We're grieving the world as we once knew it. We're grieving the way our days used to look. We're grieving a sense of safety, being able to go to the grocery store. Everything in our lives is looking different. And so we've really been encouraging people to observe their grief and kind of those reactions. We're all going to be off kilter. The whole world is doing this for the first time. And so being able to just really observe that in yourself and observe what's going on for you and how that's impacting you and what changes you're seeing in your life and your stress level and your routine as a result, and really giving yourself compassion to feel different. I think a lot of times we feel like we just have to face it head on and we keep moving, but it's really good to slow down and just go, how is this impacting me? What do I need at this point? And just really responding with ourselves with some compassion, because this just is different and no one knows how to do this perfectly. Looking out for signs of burnout and stress is really important. Just noticing any major changes or shifts in your life and seeing how that's impacting you. And whenever you do start noticing, hey, I'm not doing well, or I am feeling off kilter, we don't have to reinvent the wheel for this. We just have to keep doing the things that we know make us well. So I think a lot of folks for the first couple of weeks, it almost felt like a hurricane party. It was time to get out the extra snacks and stop exercising and Netflix extra. And now we're realizing weeks into this thing that this isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So rather than allowing ourselves to stop taking care of ourselves, it's actually extra important. Kind of like you said, Guy, this is just going to keep compounding. So this is the time to do all those basic things, to eat well, sleep well, work out, drink enough water, keep structure in our days as much as we can, even when things are completely wonky.
Right.
Contact with the people that we love. And one of the big things that we've really been talking to our folks about, because you guys are first responders, and so it is important that you stay in the know, really building limits and boundaries around media exposure, how much we're watching the news. A lot of folks can get into that habit of feeling like, hey, I have to be listening and watching the news 24/7, and that will burn anybody out.
Yeah.
So really encouraging people to just kind of think through, okay, I'm a few weeks into this. This isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So how do I now start keeping myself going? Because we're not in a sprint, we're in a marathon at this point.
Yeah. Amen.
So I'm curious what else you guys are seeing folks do that is helpful or helping them kind of keep themselves healthy as they manage all this.
We were sort of joking earlier about wearing pajama bottoms or the uniform top, but I think for folks who are isolated, I think keeping some kind of structure, or wearing your work clothes or something, taking them off, so there's some kind of psychological change. But for folks who are out there in the streets, it's obviously different. And what are you all seeing as like some of the real signs of stress, and what are some of the real indicators? Like what does that look like for you all?
Well, I come from a big law enforcement family. So what touches me is the vicarious trauma. And what I mean by that is vicarious trauma is when your first responders kind of bring something extra home from work. When the wife, when the husband, when the kids can sense that their first responder loved one is under a little more stress. So typically we may try to hide that. Men and women of first responders, they might not want to burden their families with that, but you can't separate it. And when you go in the house, they can see and sense that pressure on you. And if you don't have the opportunity to share and be open about that, then that communication, there's going to be some stress build up around that. Everybody's going to start maybe acting a little differently, a little more tense. The kids are going to sense it. So you have to realize, like Laura said, manage your expectations. You're not operating the same way you did a month ago. The coping skills that you had a month ago, if you're not using them, they might not be working now. So talk openly with your family about how you're feeling. Share with them. You're doing them a service because they love you and they want to help you. And just try to open up with them and know that, I want to go back to it. This is a critical incident. And in a critical incident, we fight, we flight, or we freeze. And although we can't really see that because this is kind of a slow moving entity, it's still happening inside of us. And so we're having those responses, although they're kind of slow. So we still need to keep on our eye out on that and help communicate and look for ways to share.
Yeah, some of the things I've been seeing in folks that I'm talking to where they're recognizing they're not doing well as they're managing all this, feeling really fatigued, feeling hopeless about the situation, really worrying that this isn't going to end. Excessive worry is a big one that I'm seeing. People just say, I can't turn this off. I'm constantly worrying about this. I'm constantly worrying about getting sick. I'm worried about getting my family sick. I'm worried about the loved ones I have up in New York or New Jersey. And then, alcohol and drug use. So a lot of people have noticed that they're drinking more. And that kind of goes back to that hurricane party. I think a lot of people are used to, hey, there's a natural disaster coming. I'm going to let myself drink a little earlier on my day off than normal. But now we're going, oh, shoot, this isn't going anywhere. And I've started drinking at 3 p.m. on my day off, and maybe that's not going to work for me. So a lot of folks are starting to go, okay, I really need to watch this. I need to make sure I'm going to bed at a decent time and I'm not drinking extra. But really just any major changes is a good thing to look out for. So if you're typically someone who loves to work out, or you're typically somebody who, doesn't drink until 6 p.m. or you're just really looking out for those changes and those shifts in you as a sign that you're having a reaction to burnout or stress.
Mm. Hey, Gerald, I'd be curious, sort of with what Laura's talking about with the burnout and stress, and then also just the flip side of maybe not having much to do. What's been your experience in talking with firefighters versus, say, EMS or dispatch, as far as the workload or the stress level or the type of stress?
Well, I think across the board, one of the issues that we're dealing with is, whether it's fire, EMS, law enforcement, 911, we're all in this business to do a good job. And we, quite frankly, most of us see ourselves as rescuers, as lifesavers, and we prepare ourselves and we work hard to be in a position to do that when the time comes. But most of our responses are quick responses. Hopefully we get a good turnaround on, for instance, a house fire. We get that under control and we get back to the station within 3 or 4 hours. And so we have some gratification or action that we've done a good job. And I don't think there's anything wrong with gaining that from your job or your profession. But now this is a long-term situation. We're not going to, this is a slow burner, and it's going to take us a while to get back to a point where we feel like we can make some valid contributions. And sometimes downtime is not a good thing. We're trying to encourage people to use the downtime they have when they're on duty to think about their self-care, to think about the fact that if they have thought about talking to a clinician, or if they thought about talking to a peer team member and they just have put it off, now is a good time to use this free time that they have to do that. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, because of our Laura and her group and many other, they have the ability to do a telehealth appointment, and it can't be much easier than that. I mean, you don't have to schedule to drive across town. You don't have to set aside time other than when you schedule your online appointment, and take some time to take care of yourself and take stock of what's going on in your life. You know, one of the biggest things is the income situation. Thankfully, at least all of us in the emergency services world are continuing to get a paycheck. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of people who have wives or husbands at home. Many folks in the emergency service world have second jobs, and those second jobs have gone away. So it's very, very tough, and unknown is what is really difficult. A lot of people in our world, we are trained to do things, and we can go and do those, and we usually get a good result. But now this is such a long-term thing. We don't know if it's going to be July, or if it's going to be June, or if it's September. It's kind of like a moving target. And God bless the ones who have children. My children are grown now and taking care of themselves, but a lot of folks have children, and they have to worry about child care when there's not school. They have to worry about child care, you know, while they're having to work and go to work. And then there's just a lot of things that are coming into play that are very difficult. I hope, and my one hope, and for me, it's what I'm trying to gain personally out of this, is an appreciation for the things that we do have, and appreciation for the things that maybe we have taken for granted. And I don't know that that'll happen again with me. And I hope that a lot of other people will think about that too, because the ability to see people and to talk to people and to be out working and taking care of your families is a very important thing. And right now we're kind of struggling with where to go with that and what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what about Guy? What's been your experience with families and some of those stressors too? And just so everyone knows, I'm monitoring a number of the questions coming in. I'm writing down what you guys want to talk about. And a lot of your questions, I think, will probably be coming up naturally in the conversation because they're very much shared. So we're all in this together. Guy, what's been your experience from the family perspective?
One of the things that I've noticed is one of the byproducts of a critical incident or a highly stressful event. One of those byproducts is our ability to concentrate. And I've heard, I've done it. I've heard my family say, you know, why am I having such a hard time entering this number? Or why am I having such a hard time performing a function that I'm so used to doing. And the reason is that our bodies are designed to protect us. So inside, it's moving some resources because it knows that we're under some type of attack. And but if we don't connect the dots, we can frustrate ourselves. And like Laura talked about, the ability to give ourselves grace, cut ourselves a break, manage our expectations, and then know it for all those brand new stay-at-home homeschool teachers that were all put on into work 2 or 3 months ago. The same thing for your kids. So they're having a hard time concentrating, and they're probably having a hard time communicating to you. So if you don't pick that up, you may think they're just goofing off or something like that. But at the same time, they're in the midst of this as well. So that's kind of what I recognize, is know that, hey, what we were able to do a few months ago might take us a little longer now. So cut yourself that break. If you have an expectation of, hey, I'm going to do homeschool with my kids today and we're going to accomplish these 13 pages, be all right with accomplishing 10. Take a break, go outside, have some fun. Those kind of things. Same thing for our first responders. Hey, I'm used to doing this. Well, hey, cut yourself a break that you can't focus quite as much because we all have a lot on our plates that weren't there. And you just realize that and take that time to use some simple techniques, like simple breathing techniques, just simple techniques where you are mindful for a few minutes and just try them in this time. It's hard for us to relate that we're in the midst of a crisis because it's just creeping along, but we are, and we're feeling the effects. So that's some of the things that I've seen, is that it's kind of hard to see on me because a lot of people say I'm confused most of the time, but I've noticed it on other people.
I'll tell you, one of the hardest things, like, to process mentally was at 5:30 driving on I-26 with no traffic, but feeling a lot of anxiety. Yeah. Usually my anxiety is attached to the traffic, but and Laura, I'd be interested in your perspective. A lot of our first responders are hypervigilant. Their gift is being able to monitor everything on the radio, hear everything going on, have a plan for every situation, and get incident updates, and they're sort of constantly going. So it's very natural for us to be watching the numbers on the TV and having to know what's the most recent number, or where we're at, where the curve is at, and the constant watching of TV, and then the inability to turn it off, or the guilt of, how can I, when everyone else is out there fighting this battle, how can I turn it off? Like, how would you speak to that, dealing with that kind of the need to know and the anxiety of the news and the numbers and the plan and so on?
Yeah, I think that just goes back to the ability to recognize that this isn't a short-term critical incident. This isn't even a hurricane where we know it's coming for X period of days and it's going to be around for this many days and then it's going to clear up. It's kind of being able to shift, because if that were the case, then by all means, let's watch the news every moment of every day until this passes and then we can go back to normal. But this has become our new normal and it's not going anywhere. And so I think I've heard from several first responders that they're starting to go, okay, I've learned I can't have it on. It's driving me crazy. I'm worrying excessively and I'm not relaxing. And in order to stay in this marathon, I've got to turn it off. And so for some people, it's just not looking at it after work. For some people, it's only looking at it twice an hour. It's just kind of finding their own limits and what they're able to do. But yeah, it's just really important, that shift between this isn't short term. And so in order to keep yourself sane and healthy and really to stay healthy enough to fight off anything that might come your way, keeping that stress level low as possible is really important.
So I'm hearing sort of in their boundaries and creating structures. And one of those that I see with folks is the understanding where the boundary is also between what you can control and what you can't, and figuring out how much time you'll invest in the worry of what you can't control and how much you'll invest in. And sometimes we invest more in the worrying because we know how to worry, but we don't always know how to. Can you speak a little bit, Laura, to the balance between control and lack of control, and where to sort of create your boundaries in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of therapy, and especially during this time, is exactly what you said. It's really figuring out where you put your energy, because we have limited energy in this time. And so, of course, we're all great at worrying. We probably could worry endlessly for, every moment of every day, but ultimately that's just going to wear us out and do us no good. So for a lot of our folks, it really is, okay, what's in my control? How do I keep myself safe? Where do I stay on the days that I'm not working to keep my family safe? Am I washing my hands? Am I wearing all my protective gear? Kind of just what is in one's control. And then I love what Guy said about giving yourself grace for the things that are outside of your control. So all of us are going through this at the same time. And so if some of those expectations you set for yourself and thought were in your control that day weren't, okay, great, let's try again tomorrow. I don't know if that really answers your question, but just I think that's people will benefit greatly by being able to, when you do find yourself worrying, really go, okay, what can I impact? And then what I cannot impact, can I just kind of stop focusing on that for the time being?
Yeah. Wow.
I think the analogy I've always heard that I really liked was when you're stuck in traffic, you can spend the entire time for 45 minutes in your car being angry about how stuck in traffic you are. Or you can use that time to make a phone call or listen to a podcast or, sit in silence and kind of enjoy that. And, I know that this isn't just 45 minutes of traffic, but it is that idea of, okay, what are we going to do with what we're given?
Mm-hmm. So as we're going through this, we're experiencing all those feelings. You're talking about being in traffic, and I'm thinking of our usual feelings, and we sort of understand them and we're acclimated to them. But I think Guy had mentioned earlier about this sense of grief of where we've lost our routine. We're grieving. Some folks are alone. They're not able to visit people. They can't see their families. A lot of the support structures are gone, and they're having to work at new ways of going about these. Can y'all sort of chime in on, and maybe Guy, if you want to start and then bounce it around, like, what does grief look like? We hear about the stages of grief. We hear about, the different models of grief, but what's that looking like nowadays? So in other words, how do we, within ourselves, with all of us sort of being different and experiencing things different, what are some of the grief experiences or stages or, places that we're experiencing right now? And how can we sort of understand what that is?
Yeah. I think Laura did a great job setting it up. The number one thing is the recognition. A lot of us don't recognize that we have an emotional reaction to something that's been taken away from us. And how I see it is when you hear people talk about the used to, I used to exercise, I used to be able to do this, when that's one thing that we all have in common. All humans, we have a sense of being in control. We thrive, and our first responder community, as our families will testify, we are experts at being in control or thinking that we're in control. So that's what really rocks our world about the things that have been taken away from us. Our normal routine of kids going to school, of spouses going to work, of my normal shift, of all those things that were being able to go focus on your hobbies, those things are gone. And if you are around people who talk about what's been taken from them, those are people that may be stuck in that grief and stuck in that loss. But if we are people of control, flip that around. Take control, like Laura said, of what we can control. We can control getting dressed in the morning and shaving and taking a shower. We can control our diet. We can control the structure for our kids. We can control fun time. We can control the first responder. We're still going to operate with integrity if we choose to control that. So we can turn this around and regain control. They might not be those original things, but they actually, like Gerald alluded to, they may be more important to our well-being and our future by the new things that we take control of, that we take control of this situation, of the things that we can.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's they say that since the beginning of man, I think I heard Thomas Keating say this. He said, since the beginning of time, man's tried to control his surroundings, and the statistics show that not one human being has been able to do that. But yet every morning we wake up and try and accomplish it every day.
Right.
Hey, Gerald, I'd be curious, for a lot of folks, the being alone part is really hard. What are you finding? We always joke that firefighters are like puppies. They all, they're all together, and cops are like kittens. They scatter after a call. Everyone goes off in their own direction. How is it from your perspective with folks who are used to being with their squad or team, and they're not, or folks who are retired and can't get together with that social support? What are you finding that are positive ways that people are coping with the isolation and trying to overcome some of that?
Well, obviously, and you bring up a good point, the retirees, we have had lots of contact with retirees lately who are feeling more so than ever that they are not able to contribute to things, and they're concerned about the folks back at the firehouse. They're concerned, they feel guilty about the fact that they've retired and they're not there to help the folks and be a part of what's going on. It's really pretty complex. One thing, let me veer off here for just a minute. One thing that I would like to address is our leadership. Our fire chiefs, our police chiefs, our sheriffs, our EMS directors, our 911 directors, those kinds of people are being put in a position to provide support and care for their soldiers, if they will, more than they ever have before. And a lot of people out in the field, out in the ranks, are concerned about the right decisions that are going to be made for them if they have been exposed to someone who has the virus, if they had a situation that involved being around a situation with the virus involved. Are the right decisions being made? And one thing we have to know, in spite of the fact that we've all the chiefs and the leaders that I know have been around a very long time, this is a new thing. I don't think that any of us have ever had to prepare for much of the unknown as we have in this situation. So I would ask everybody, please remember your leadership out there, and I would ask the leadership to please remember that your folks are depending on you more than ever now. And I understand that the buck stops in your office, and that's a difficult place to be, and it's probably as bad now as it's ever going to be, we hope. But understand that we're also out here for you. All the people represented here this morning are out here for you to take care of you. Obviously, fire chiefs and sheriffs and police chiefs are not going to step up and openly say that they need help or they're having difficulty. So do whatever how you want to do it. Talk to one another if you need to, but at least try to take care of yourselves, because there's a lot of folks out here depending on you, and I know that's adding to the stress. So.
Thank you. That's awesome. One of the comments was about, we're so used to using the term new normal, and one of the comments was, something along the lines of, where's the optimism in that statement? Because none of us want this as our normal, and we don't want this as our new way of life. So, how do you reclaim that? Laura, I'd be interested in, we tend to think of all of this stuff as an either or. Either life is okay or life isn't. And right now we're either in a pandemic and everything's terrible, or we're done and back to normal or whatever that looks like. But maybe it's more of a both and. Maybe it's we are in a pandemic and there are positive things we can do. What are some of, to use that analogy from earlier, some of the seeds we can plant in the mud? Like what are some really positive coping strategies that we can use in this time? What would you offer?
I think this is really forcing people to kind of look at their own mental health and their own resources and their own resiliency and call upon those resources. I think for a lot of people, they're calling people they haven't called in months or years and reconnecting, and people are, when able, spending more beautiful time with their kids than they ever expected. And yes, sometimes that's stressful, but I think sometimes they're building some really great memories too. And it's really just giving people an opportunity to like take a pulse, start paying attention to what you're experiencing in a way that maybe some people haven't ever really done. Not all of us spend their days kind of going, okay, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I needing? And this is a really good opportunity to start doing that. And all of those behaviors, all these things that we can put into place to survive this pandemic are in the long run hopefully going to make us healthier on the other end of this. We're hopefully going to have stronger connections, and we're going to have a better read on ourselves and what our needs are and our ability to communicate those things if we choose to try to use this time to do that. And I think Gerald mentioned this earlier, but this is a really good time that if you recognize you do need some help, that you're, on your off days, you are a little more bored and you've got that time to sit with your thoughts and you realize there's some stuff that you really need to talk through. This is a great time to reach out to a chaplain or a peer or get signed up for therapy. I think almost all of us are still operating. It's different, it's call or video, but we're here and we're ready to help you through it, and would love the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we're running so much that we don't always acknowledge our feelings. We don't always realize that we have these things going on. I think when I first started seeing a clinician was when I realized that I hadn't processed certain calls, and I had no clue that I hadn't processed it. It just sort of creeped up on me, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. I think that's a sign that I've been talking about. So suddenly I had to take care of myself. One of the things I think also is we're so in the midst of things that we feel sad or we feel angry or we feel anxious, and we tend to over-identify with those feelings. So, I am anxious, I am angry. There's no real distance from it. Laura, what would you say to what would be some coping skills to help us recognize that we do exist apart from just those feelings, that we can have a little bit of distance from them and some space to process them and find positive coping skills?
I wish I had the scientific knowledge. I know there is some to explain why this is the case, but when I'm experiencing anxiety or I'm experiencing sadness, just my ability to observe that and name it helps my brain actually take a step away from it. And being able to name something just helps you recognize that this isn't all of me. This is a part of me. This is a thought that I'm having. This is a feeling that I'm having. But it takes on kind of a unique role outside of just being completely who I am. And I heard a definition of hope the other day that just talked about part of what hope is just recognizing that there's a bigger picture than this, and this is going to get better someday. And so I think when we're able to name, hey, right now I'm sad, I'm not always going to be sad. Right now I'm upset about this, or I'm anxious about this, but it's not always going to be that way. And so just being able to kind of name that and recognize it's a temporary feeling, a temporary thought, it's not a forecast of the future, and this will shift. I mean, we are a resilient group of people, and so we are going to figure our way through this.
Yeah.
One thing.
Yeah, I think that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Laura. What happens a lot of times is when we talked about the family and our first responders coming home, and I think our families can help us if we come home and we seem to be agitated like Laura said, if you can identify that emotion, like, hey, honey, you sound really angry today, or you sound really mad, that helps your responder pause and say, yeah, you're right, I am a little angry. But then a little more conversation will say, well, I'm angry because of this. And then you can talk about the real reason. You're not an angry person. You just happen to be upset about a specific thing. And that just opens the door. And then hopefully that you get that out of your system, and you've shared, and you're going to feel better. So that's a great point. We talked about the marathon and the sprint, and I know our pastor said about this pandemic that we need to just settle down and settle in, and just ride it. And Laura's point about, hey, and Gerald talked about, hey, pausing and kind of taking the time to see where you're at. You can't get anywhere on a map unless you know where your feet are. Mm-hmm. Unless you pause to find out your point on the map, you're bound to wander. So I know myself, a lot of first responders, we don't often pause and kind of reflect about where we are in life or how things are going. We're just kind of moving from day to day, but this may be that time where we pause, see where we're at, kind of see what's important to us, and use this time to head in the direction of what we deem to be important for ourselves and our families.
Also, one thing that I think about a lot is we have this saying, and I'm sure all of y'all have used it yourself, but in our training programs and all, when we talk about self-care, is that we can't always control what's happening to us, but we can control the way we react to that. And if you give up that piece of self-control, then you really will be flouncing around and really having some difficulty. And the one thing that keeps me kind of on track in the midst of all of what's going on is I believe and I recognize anywhere I go and anybody I see that we're really all in this together. It doesn't matter whether it's a bank teller or somebody working at the gas station, a police officer, a firefighter, someone in the supermarket. This is the first time in my life, which has spanned 70 years now, that I've ever felt that sort of connection with people in the community, that we all are in this together. We'll get to the other side of it. Some will get to the other side quicker and better than others. But the point is, we can continue to support one another. And I have learned more about appreciation for the friends in my life and the people in my life in the last month than I probably did in 6 years or 7 years before that. But I look forward. I'm not setting any lofty goals. I'm not thinking that I'm going to get my mortgage paid off by the end of this. But I am thinking about that first dozen Krispy Kreme donuts I can get my hands on. So short-term goals, some kind of gratification, knowing that we can continue to do this, and we will continue to do this. This is a great country, and despite differences in political views and that sort of thing, this country didn't get where it is today. People that do, and I feel that we all have a piece of that control, and we all can contribute to some extent to the future of where we're all headed. And keep on it. He's never let me down. I'm pretty sure he's not going to let me down this time. I'm very appreciative of the folks out there who allow us to help them and to be a part of their lives. And it's important for me that they know that we're here. We're going to continue to be here. We struggle with the fact that we can't get out and do as much as we want to do and help people, but we want you to understand that we thinking about you regularly, and we have people in place to help you if you need that help. And so we're looking forward to all getting through this on the other side of this. And my fellow panelists here, I can't tell you how much it means to us to have y'all in our lives as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Rich, the one thing I did want to go back to is, once we kind of get to that point where we are naming our emotions, identifying them, and being able to validate them, we don't want to get caught up in that game of, well, I don't get to feel sad because I don't know anyone that's sick, or I don't get to feel scared because I'm not living in New York. I think all of our needs and our feelings are valid right now. But once we're able to validate those, I think it goes back to that kind of idea. Once I identify what I'm feeling, figure out what you're needing and kind of what's in your control to kind of help meet that need. And just really being able to validate what we're all walking through, because if we're not acknowledging it, then we can't treat the need. Kind of like you said, sometimes when we slow down, suddenly we realize there's this need there that we didn't even know we had. That's a really good opportunity for us all to kind of slow down, recognize what our needs are, and start responding to them.
Yeah.
It's
and you hear that from a lot of folks. You hear that they are starting to try and focus on things they hadn't done. Or I just sit out on the porch and I can hear all these woodworking projects happening in the neighborhood. I can't imagine what's going on, but that people are trying new things. To borrow, we're very well aware of our bad coping mechanisms, right? But to borrow from a bad coping mechanism, for folks who struggle with, say, alcohol addiction, there's it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Or there's always something to celebrate. No matter how bad your day is, there's something to celebrate, right? Well, why can't we use those kinds of coping attitudes in a positive way? So how do we shift our perspective? If we can say, I'm having a terrible day, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? How can we say, this may be a really tough day, or it has been a tough shift, or I'm dealing with some tough family issues, or we're in the middle of a pandemic. But there are other things that are positive that are happening that I can start to look at, or there actually is something I can celebrate. And sometimes the sense of that rule, like we talked about, that rule of 3, where it's not good or bad, or good and bad, but maybe it's bad situation, but let's try and think of 2 positive things that are happening simultaneously. Laura, I'd be interested in what are some real practical things to help us sort of broaden our perspective and realize that maybe even that feeling we're acknowledging isn't the only thing, or maybe the reality that we just experienced today isn't the only thing. Are there things that you would offer that could help us to sort of level the playing field a little bit, and maybe realize that there may actually even be more positive things and opportunities in our life than we realize?
Yeah, I think especially for anyone that struggles with anxiety or depression, and I think at this point probably everyone's got a little bit of anxiety, if not a lot of anxiety, that can create a negative filter on the lens that we're looking through. So really actively trying to open that filter and see the beauty. It can be as cheesy and as simple as making sure at the end of the day you're writing down 5 things you noticed about humanity's response that was beautiful, or 5 nice moments in your day that you wouldn't have had if we weren't going through a weird pandemic right now. Just really, I think sometimes it just takes us really intentionally opening up our lens to see the good also, not to negate the bad, not to say the bad's not happening, but just to make sure it makes it in our lens.
Yeah, I think, Rich, one of the things to help to answer your question is, we all have a tribe, we all have a family, we all have a group of people that we do life with, and we all know that some people do life better than others. So stop and look at the people in your tribe, and look at the people that are responding more positively. Look at the people that seem to be navigating it a little better, and come alongside them and see how they're doing it. Ask for their help. Because we also have people in our tribe that don't navigate things in a positive way. So this may be a time where we might want to move a little bit away from them and get our advice, get our inspiration from people around us that are doing it right.
Yeah, and in that same tune, I love that. In that same tune, I think, maybe make sure you're keeping contact with those people that seem to be keeping hope in this whole thing, because it's really easy for negativity to breed negativity. And so making sure you're putting yourself around people that seem like they're keeping their head above water. and staying in contact with them regularly. So if you can't kind of come up with that lens, positive lens developing on your own, they can kind of add to that.
What would you all say about, like, the intentionality of doing something positive? Sometimes it's really hard to do it, and a lot of us are perfectionists. So, we might have an intentionality to take a walk, but then I think, well, I don't have 2 hours to go walk that 8 miles or whatever it is. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Sometimes we set these really lofty goals. Like, how do we do in the midst of this things that are manageable and that we can actually repeat, and have that kind of intentionality to continue with.
Yeah. Well, I know, for me, it's that mindset. I think a lot of people can probably identify this. This is Guy Van Horn. You only start a diet on Monday. So the weekend I used to, hey, I'm going to have fun this weekend. I'm going to start a diet on Monday. But through the years, I've learned that, to your point, Rich, that if on Friday or Saturday, I start making small steps about maybe saying no, to this, or saying no to that, but enjoying something else, then when Monday rolls around, I'm not so far behind the curve. And it was just that little step. And what I found was those little positive steps of, okay, I'm going to walk around the neighborhood tonight. Well, I only got down to the neighbor's house. But hey, I had a great conversation with him. So when you get back home, it's like, hey, that was cool. Not, man, I missed my goal. You did get out of the house. You did walk for a little bit, and you probably talked to a neighbor you hadn't seen in a while. So small, just small steps start building that momentum. You can't, I think somebody mentioned, this is not the time to become a marathon runner if you're not a marathon runner, but it might be a time to start walking and jogging a little bit that you weren't doing at all before. So come out of this building some good steps, but give yourself that grace that, hey, I'm not going to run around. I might not get it, but I'm going to try.
What would you all, if you each had to pick one, a wellness minute, like one thing that people could do in 60 seconds every day that would promote wellness for them, what might you offer? I would start it out, and I would say to just spend 1 minute being grateful, just spending a minute, maybe writing down things you're happy for. Set the timer, write down things you're thankful for, you're glad for, and then things that you are thankful that you can do for others. What would you say, Laura? What would be your wellness minute?
I think just doing that practice of, sit still, take a body scan, notice what you're feeling, normalize it for yourself, name it, and just let it be. Don't judge it, but just let it be. I think we all can really learn from just letting ourselves daily start paying attention to how we're feeling.
Yeah. Gerald, what would you say?
Well, I think, again, being still. Just be still for a minute. And when I say be still, let your mind rest, let your body rest. That comes from suggestion that a dear friend of ours, actually Lauderdale, shared with us about advice she got from her mother about just being still. And you really don't think about that. You really don't think about how much you move in a day, whether it's physically moving or mentally moving, and just being able to sit there and kind of take a break and take a deep breath can be pretty darn refreshing. I quite frankly use it very often.
Awesome.
I like to take that minute, and when my family's around, I love to watch my wife for a minute, watch my daughter, watch my grandchildren, watch someone in my family. Just look at them for a minute. Don't say anything. And, I always find that my heart, my mind turns towards them, and it just fills me up with positive energy and just an appreciation to have that visual appreciation of how blessed I am.
That's awesome.
It's like looking at it's like looking at the three of you.
It seems like there's this balance between looking inward and looking outward. You know, this sense that, yes, we do have to acknowledge what's happening inside, what we're feeling, what our body's feeling, and be in touch with that and acknowledge it. But then also we have to balance it with focusing on other people or doing for others or some kind of appreciating nature, or, you know, whatever it is, there's a balance.
And in all of it, we have to be still in order to do it.
Yeah. And I know, you know, from a faith perspective too, being still and releasing and processing things is really important. And, you know, I just, from a chaplain perspective, whether someone's a person of faith or not, we all need some kind of way to realize that we're a part of something greater, whether it's our family, or whether it's nature, or whether it's God or our spirituality. We all need to be a part. And for a lot of us, we find that feeling of loss of control, it makes a big difference to have faith where we can put some trust in the things that we have no control over. And if we don't have faith, that might be that our family is able to talk through those things with us, and we have faith in the people around us and in the goodness of life. But regardless, we have to find a place to sort of place those things we can't control and that we worry about, and be able to release those. What would you all say, just sort of going forward, or let's just do a round robin, like what might be helpful that we haven't touched on, or what might be something that we feel is important to say? And while we're doing that, I'm going to make sure we didn't in some way cover some of the questions that came up. Gerald, I'll let you start with words of wisdom.
Wow. I would try to say, and rather than seeing this time as a penalty and having to sit at home and not go to work and not go out to the movies or go to the parks or whatever it is we want to do, take some time just to be thankful for what you have. Take some time for getting some things done around the house to make you feel some accomplishment. If anybody has a shortage of things to do, I have a pretty long list over here. So just take care of yourselves. Use this time. You know, we've kind of been given a blessing, if you will, to take a time out. And it's across the board. Everybody's affected by it, regardless of where you live and how much money you make. And I know it's difficult for some people, and I know it's difficult financially and emotionally and all that, but understand that we've all been given a chance to take a time out, and we should take this time out and try to enjoy the things that are important to us. As Guy said, spend time with your family. I'm going to go take a look at my wife here in a few minutes, and I appreciate that suggestion. Just take care of ourselves. There's going to be plenty of work to do, plenty of things to do to get back on our feet and get this country moving again, and we will do it. We can do it, and we will do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
John. Yeah, I'd like to challenge everybody that I hope no one says, when the pandemic's over, I'm going to start this. When the pandemic's over, I'm going to get my finances in order. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to eat better. My hope is that they begin that immediately. You know, take control back of what you can control. Don't wait till this is over to love on your kids a little bit more. Spend this time they need more attention than they've ever had because of their feeling this thing. So spend as much time as you can with them. Don't put off these positive things until it's over. Put them in place now, because the things that I hope that everything you've heard from us, that you know that it comes from our heart, that we only want the best for you. And these are things that help us through life before the pandemic and after the pandemic. So these are tips and principles that help all of us first responders and our families navigate life day in and day out. So that's my challenge, is don't wait to make these changes, and make small changes like we talked about. Just start taking control and making those little changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I would just encourage everybody to give yourself some grace, adjust your expectations a little bit. Your life's turned upside down, so it's okay to have things look a little bit different, and just really keep your lens open for good and for positive. You've got to survive this. And if you find yourself unable to do those things, I really would encourage yourself to give yourself the compassion to reach out to a chaplain or a peer or a counselor.
Awesome.
We'd love to help you.
Yeah, I think for my perspective, I think in the midst of our anxieties and all that's going on, and we wash our hands and then look up in the mirror, and the thought is, oh, you again. Like I would encourage us to say, to ourselves, it's good to see you again, and to just be gentle on yourselves, as has been mentioned, but to recognize that there's a unique you that from my faith perspective, that God created to do only what you can do, and just figure out whatever that good is and just do it, and start small. Start as small as you can, so that you have a very instant success. But just be you. And our first responders out there, y'all are amazing, and we're all here because we love you dearly and deeply. And so no matter what anxieties or what loans or all the negative stuff, you all are just simply amazing, and we're so inspired by what you do. So just keep being you, and keep being who you were created to be, in the special way that you are. And so I think, just to sort of close, we had talked, the four of us, in planning this, of like, if we could challenge everyone and give them a challenge to go away with, to work on, give everyone a little homework, what would that be? And Guy had some wonderful thoughts on it. So we're going to sort of let Guy close us out and offer that challenge for us. But before we do that, I just want to go around and ask everyone, how can folks contact you if they've seen something or heard something and thought, maybe it's good to reach out to them or someone else in their group? How would they contact you? Gerald, what would be the best way?
For our firefighters, EMS, and 911 telecommunicators, the number is 843-609-8300, 843-609-8300, or go online to firefightersupport.org, and you can send us a message.
Awesome.
The best way is my email. It's peersupport@charlestoncounty.org.
Awesome. And we'll, of course, we'll post these, and we'll link everyone's pages as best we can. For the chaplaincy, it would be our 24/7 duty chaplain number, which is 843-724-1212. Or you can send an email to me at rich@coastalcrisischaplain.org.
And our first responder support team, you guys can call 843-212-8975. And then if you want to reach me directly, you can shoot me an email at laura.tate, that's TAIT, @scdmh.org.
Awesome. Well, everyone watching, whether it's now or later, just please know you're loved, and please know you're appreciated, and you're not alone. And we're going to turn it over to Guy and let him close us out with a good challenge for the time.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, we had been talking about different things we can do to hopefully challenge y'all to try to get things jump started. You've heard advice about taking little steps and how they pay off. And it just fell on me the one practical thing that we can all do together is Easter Sunday is just 2 days away, and that's something that we've lost control over. How many of us go to sunrise services? How many of us dress up our kids in their finest Sunday clothes and go to church and just enjoy beautiful spring weather and the Easter message, the Easter egg hunts and the food and the chocolates and all those things that aren't going to look the same this year. But our challenge is take some of the tips that we talked about and make this Easter one that you'll never forget. You can still have Easter at home. You can just try different things. Go online at suggestions, but make this a memorable time. If family and friends can't be at your house, Zoom some Easter time, talk to them, make it a great Easter for your kids. I challenge everybody that as we look back on this in years to come, that everybody will remember the special things they did highlighted around our Easter time this year. Rich?
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And thank you to everyone who's been sending messages and joining us today. And again, just know you're loved. So on behalf of our Lowcountry Firefighter Support Team and the Charleston County Sheriff's Office peer support and all of our peer support, and Laura with Department of Mental Health First Responder Support Team, clinicians, and the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy, to name just a small portion of all the people who love you. We thank you all for joining us, and we're here for you. You're not alone, and be encouraged and choose that one good thing that you can do, and have a wonderful Easter, as Guy said. Take care. Love y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.